Chapter number 7, right? The Adventure, written by Jern Narlikar. The Jijmata Express sped along the Pune-Bombay route considerably faster than the Deccan Queen. There was no industrial township outside Pune. The first stop, Lonavala, came in 40 minutes. The guard section that followed was no different from what he knew. The train stopped at Karjat only briefly and went at an ever greater speed. It rode through Kalyan, right? Before we begin with this chapter, I have not written the summary of this chapter because the name of the chapter suggests everything. That is adventure. That is the adventure. If I write the summary over here, it will be a very short summary, right? It is all about traveling places from one place to the other place, right? And that is what it is in this chapter. There is nothing new, but the writer, that is Jayant Narlikar, travels from one to the other place and finds some things in different places, and that is what the adventure is. That is what the adventure is. It is just he is traveling from different places from one to the other, right? And there he finds the adventure, and there he finds the adventure, right? So that is why I have not written the summary of this chapter, right? Because the summary, that is the title itself, is what the chapter is all about, right? Moving from one place to the other, and that is where the adventure is hidden. That is where the adventure is hidden. It is neither a story, neither a particular message, but from traveling one place to the other place. Traveling from one place to the other place, and that is what the adventure is all about, where he finds certain small and new things which makes the particular journey the adventurous one. This is what the chapter is all about. Not a story, not a learning message, or not any kind of thing. That is why I have not written the summary. We just have to read this chapter, right? And we have to understand where he travels from one place to the other and what he finds in this chapter in traveling from one to the other place, right? So let's start it again. The Jijmata Express, that is the name of the train, right? Sped along the Pune-Bombay route considerably faster than the Deccan Queen, right? It's a faster train compared to the Deccan Queen. The Deccan Queen is the name of the other train, right? There were no industrial townships outside Pune. At that point of time, there were no industrial townships outside Pune, right? The first stop, Lonavala, came in 40 minutes. He is describing the traveling distance and where he is traveling from and what is the duration and all. He is describing everything, right? In 40 minutes. The guard section that followed was no different from what he knew. The train stopped at Karjat only briefly and went on an ever greater speed, right? It rode through Kalyan. It is traveling to different places and it is, moving very fast. The train is moving very fast, right? Meanwhile, the racing mind of Professor Gaitonde had arrived at a plan of action in Bombay. Meanwhile, there is one more character, that is Professor Gaitonde. There is Professor Gaitonde. The name of the character is Professor Gaitonde, right? Meanwhile, the racing mind, the mind of the particular professor, that is the racing mind, right? Professors, they are very sharp and they are very, they think very fastly. So that is what it is. The racing mind of Professor Gaitonde had arrived at a plan of an action in Bombay. Indeed, as a historian, he felt he should have thought of it sooner. He is a professor in the history, an historian professor, right? And he thinks too much of certain places, right? And he travels through the journey, right? He would go to a big library and browse through history books, right? He is fond of history and he wants to research each and everything as a part of the history through traveling, right? That was the surest way of finding how the present state of affairs were reached. And that is why he is finding the present state of affairs means the present condition or the present situation in what we are living today, right? He wants to find out something from the book of the history, how the things were developed, how the present state of the condition is there today, and how that particular concept was being made in the previous years. He wants to find out in the books of history. Who? Professor Gaitonde, right? And he is traveling in a train. Right? That was the surest way of finding out the present state of affairs was reached. He also planned eventually to return to Pune and have a long walk with Rajendra Deshpande, right? He wanted to make a research and he wanted to find out the present state of affairs, right? And again, he also planned eventually to return to Pune. Then he again wanted to come back to Pune and have a long talk with Rajendra Deshpande. Rajendra Deshpande is again a new character in this chapter, who would surely help him to understand what had happened. what had happened. Rajendra Deshpande is again a particular friend, and he knows everything. He wanted to learn from the books of the history, that is the present state of affairs, wanted to come back to Pune again, discuss each and everything with Rajendra Deshpande, talk everything with Rajendra Deshpande, who would help him understand what had happened in the history and what it is today, and how there are differences which are being occurred, right? That is what the adventure is, through traveling, right? And finding the course of current state of affairs through the historical books, right? You were in 10th standard at one point of time, right? You were even studying social science. You learned each and everything about the historical concepts in the first to 7 chapters, right? That is town planning and all that concepts. We understand everything when we read the books of the historical concepts, right? And we try to understand and figure it out, that situation with the present situation. And there are always some differences, right? Even in that time and even in this time. So there are certain people who are fond of reading the books of history, right? So he wanted to discuss each and everything with Rajendra Deshpande, who would help him understand what had happened, right? Moving ahead. This is assuming that in this world there existed someone called Rajendra Deshpande. The train stopped beyond the long tunnel. He was traveling through the train, right? And it stopped in the long tunnel. It was a small station. It was a small station called Sarhad, borders, right? It was Sarhad, it is border, but a station no naam. That was the name of the station, called Sarhad. An Anglo-Indian in uniform went through the train checking permits. Checking permits, TT, right? The ticket checker, right? He was an Anglo-Indian. He was an Anglo-Indian, half German, half Indian. And Anglo-Indian, right? Urdu background. Germany or Europe and Urdu background, India. So these people are known as the Anglo-Indian, right? They look half Indian and half foreigners, right? That kind of thing. An Anglo-Indian in uniform, that is, he was in the train. That is the uniform of the particular ticket checker, right? Went through the train checking permits, whether all the particular person traveling in the trains are legal. He was checking the tickets, right? It stopped in a long tunnel, and it was a small station called Sarhad. The name of the station was Sarhad, right? Right now, he wants to know each and everything from the book of the past, of the history, and he wants to discuss each and everything with Rajendra Deshpande, so that both can discuss everything and they can understand what the current state of affairs is, right? Moving ahead. And for this thing, he is traveling from one to the other place, right? The name of the places are being given in this textbook. Moving ahead. This is where the British Raj begins. You are going for the first time, I presume. Khan Sahib asked, right? Yes, the reply was factually correct. Gangadhar Pant had not been to this Bombay before. He ventured a question, and Khan Sahib, how will you go to Peshawar? Right? The train goes to the Victoria terminus, that is Bombay, right? Victoria terminus. I will take the frontier way tonight out of the central, right? How far does it go? By what route? Bombay to Delhi, then to Lahore, and then Peshawar. A long journey. I will reach Peshawar the day after tomorrow. Now there are certain other people named Khan Sahib in the train who are discussing each and everything. So that is what the conversation is going on. Yes, and the reply was factually correct. Gangadhar Pant had never been to Bombay before. Right? Who is Gangadhar Pant? Do you know? Who is Gangadhar Pant? Right? Professor Gaitonde. Professor Gaitonde, right? Had not been to Bombay before. The other name in which they were discussing in their particular train box, right? He ventured a question, and Khan Sahib, how will you go to Peshawar? Right? The train goes to Victoria terminus. I take the frontier mail tonight out to the central. How far does it go? By what route? Bombay to Delhi, and then to Lahore, and then to Peshawar. A long journey. I will reach Peshawar the day after tomorrow. Right? Khan Sahib is discussing each and everything, and how will you go, and all the normal things that are being discussed with Mr. Khan. And how will you go to Peshawar? That is from Bombay to Delhi, and from Delhi to Lahore, and from Lahore, and then it's to Peshawar. A long journey. I will reach Peshawar the day after tomorrow. Then after Khan Sahib spoke a lot about his business, and Gangadhar Pant was willing to listen. And there are certain people, and Khan Sahib was talking about business. He was traveling to Peshawar. The questions were being asked, how will you travel? That is from Bombay to Delhi, and from Delhi to Lahore, right? And all these kinds of things were being discussed. Train ma obviously after bhega kya hoy, koi bhi loko hoy. So obviously they start talking with each other, right? And they are discussing the things in the train. That is, Khan Sahib spoke a lot about his business. He was talking in the train, and he was sharing all the things about his business. And Gangadhar Pant was listening, right? For in this way, he was able to get some flavor of life in this India that was so different, right? He was trying to understand different people with different communication, and he was trying to understand the minds and the business set of the people, right? Through the communication process that was going on in the train, right? Moving ahead. The train now passed through the suburban rail traffic. The blue carriages carried the letter GBMR on the side, that is Greater Bombay Metropolitan Railway. That is GBMR, Greater Bombay Metropolitan Railway, right? The train is now passing through the rail traffic. That means old situations, right? The Greater Bombay hatu એ સમયની વાત છે, because we are considering the books of the history, right? Greater Bombay Metropolitan Railway. Explain Khan Sahib. See the tiny Union Jack painted on each carriage. જે કલર હતો carriage એટલે box, right? ટ્રેન ના અલગ અલગ જે ડબ્બા હોય ને, that are known as the carriages, right? Union Jack painted on each carriage, right? The color of the carriage, that is the box. A gentle reminder that we are in British territory. A gentle reminder that we are in British territory, right? In the British era હતો એની બધી વાત ચાલે છે, right? Because of the color of the particular box of the carriage. The train began to slow down beyond Dadar and stopped only at its destination, that is Victoria Terminus. અત્યારે છત્રપતિ શિવાજી છે, but at that point of time, as we are talking about the history, right, it was Victoria Terminus. The station looked remarkably neat and clean. The staff was mostly made up of Anglo-Indians. At that point of time, there were Britishers, right? Before 1947, British era, right? So there were some even the European people who were there in India. So it was an Anglo-Indian concept, right? The train began to slow down beyond Dadar and stopped only at its destination, that is Victoria Terminus, right? The station looked remarkably neat and clean. The staff was mostly made up of Anglo-Indians and Parsis, along with a handful of British officials, right? As he emerged from the station, Gangadhar found himself facing an imposing building. The letters on it proclaimed its identity to those who didn't know this Bombay Landmark, East India House headquarters of the East India Company, right? A landmark હતો જેવો ટ્રેન માંથી ઉતરો ગંગાધર પંત, he found a particular coding on the particular heading, that is the letters on it proclaimed a identity, right? That is East India House, headquarter of the East India Company. East India Company, right? તમે SS માં ભણી ગયા. They all traveled through the sea routes and they developed themselves in India. They settled themselves in Bombay, right? That is the East India Company. અને પછી આખી East India Company જેવો આપણને independence મળ્યો, they moved away from our country and many things were being discussed, right? So as he emerged from the station, Gangadhar Path himself facing a building, a મોટી building જોઈ Gangadhar Path, right? And on the heading, that means on the head it was written East India House, headquarter of the East India Company, right? Prepared as he was for many shocks, Professor Gaitonde had not expected this, right? The East India Company had been moved up shortly after the events of 1857, right? હવે ઘણી બધી વસ્તુ expect નહોતી કરી history ની અંદર, right? So history એક એવી વસ્તુ છે that as you read more and more you find something which is new or which you have never heard. એટલે એ બધી જ્યારે discussion ચાલે છે, at that point of time Professor Gaitonde had not expected this, right? એ જે Professor Gaitonde હતો, right, એકદમ sharp અને એકદમ fast minded નો હતો, એટલે એ આવી બધી વસ્તુ એને ક્યારે expect કે imagine કરી નહોતી. That is the East India Company had been moved up shortly after the events of 1857. So he thought presently એ અત્યારે આજના current state of affairs માં છે, but એ history માં જાય છે, he is going to the history. અને એના મગજમાં એવું હતું કે 1857 ના જે ઇવેન્ટ્સ થયા હતા, after that East India Company was not that much strong enough. But when he goes into that particular place and when he reads the book of the history, he finds something new. He finds something new and he is shocked. That is the East India Company had been wounded up shortly after the events of 1857. At least this is what history books say, right? એના મગજમાં એવું હતું કે history books માં તો આવું જ લખેલું છે, એટલે એ એવું જ માનીને ચાલતો, right? Because it is our mentality that whatever the books in the, so that is the historical books that has been written, we believe it, right? પછી તમે બહુ deep માં એનું study કરવા જાઓ, when you go deep inside and study the historical concept, you will find many variations which are there, right? તમે SS માં જે history ભણતા હતા, એ તો maybe 1 to 2% of the concepts that you were studying as a part of the history. When you look down the history of India, it's too big. And obviously you are going to find different writers who have different books on the historical concept and you are going to find the differences. And then you will realize, oh, this is the real situation. Right? એના માટે સ્ટડી કરવું પડે, રિસર્ચ કરવું પડે, and then you will be able to find something as a part of the history with certain proof. With certain proof, right? History એક બહુ મોટો કોન્સેપ્ટ છે. આપણા જે forefathers છે જે બધું મૂકી ગયા, બનાવી ગયા, how it is, how it was. અહીંયા એ જ રિસર્ચની વાત ચાલે છે. current state of affairs, right? What led into this current state of affairs which were being founded in that time, હવે એ સમયની અંદર એ કેવી રીતે કરંટ સ્ટેટ ઓફ અફેર્સ હતા અને અત્યારે આ શું છે, હવે એનો જે ડિફરન્સ છે એ હિસ્ટ્રીની બુક્સમાંથી એ સમજવાની ટ્રાય કરે છે. That is Professor Gaitonde, and he found one shocking thing, that is the East India Company had been wounded up shortly after the events of 1857. There are certain events એવા થયા હતા 1857 ની અંદર, right? And he thought, as he read the book of the history, that the East India Company would be wounded up. Wounded up means it would be closed down, right? At least this is what the history book says. એટલે એને જે એક હિસ્ટ્રી બુક વાંચેલી છે એમાં આવી રીતે ઇન્ફોર્મેશન આપેલી છે. But when he was going more in a depth research, he found the heading, that is the East India House headquarter of the East India Company, right? Moving ahead, yes, here it was not only alive but flourishing. So history had taken a different turn, perhaps before 1857. Now he is trying to get something new. Professor Gaitonde is getting new information, right? जो ये શું કહે છે, yes, here it was, that means the heading was still there. આ જે heading આપેલું છે એ હજુ હતું એ જગ્યાએ, right? So history had taken a different turn. History had taken a different turn, perhaps before 1857. Perhaps before 1857. એટલે 1857 before એવા ઘણા ઇન્સિડન્ટ્સ અથવા એવા ઘણા બધા ક્રાઇટેરિયા હશે જે બુકમાં મેન્શન કરેલા નથી. And that is how he is getting to get all the information, right? How and when had happened, he had to find out. How and when it happened, he had to find it out from the books of the history. કોને find out કરવાના હતા? Professor Gaitonde, right? As he walked along Hornbill Road, as it was called, he found a different set of shops and office building. There was no handloom house building. Instead, there were boots and Woolworths department stores, imposing office of the Lloyds, Barclays and other British banks, as in typical high street of a town in England, right? હવે જે અત્યારે મુંબઈ છે એ સમયમાં બોમ્બે હતું. Talking about the British era, right? So at that point of time it was Bombay. The East India Company people were there in that particular city, and as he moves away into that particular place, a different set of shops and other office buildings which were being there in Bombay, right? And there was no handloom house building. Handloom house building એટલે જે ઇન્ડિયાની handloom house building હોય એવું ત્યાં કંઈ હતું નહીં, but એની જગ્યાએ શું હતું? Instead there were boots and Woolworth departmental stores, right? Shoes ni shop હતી, Woolworths departmental stores, as imposing offices of Lloyds, Barclays and other British banks, as it is seen in a street of town in England, in Bombay. History ની વાત છે, right? તો જ્યારે બ્રિટિશર્સ હતા ત્યારે બોમ્બે હતું, and when we got the independence it became Mumbai, right? So as he is reaching more and more and trying to find more in the historical concepts, right? So he is finding all these things in Bombay, that is Woolworth departmental stores, offices of Lloyds, Barclays and other British banks, as in typical high street of a town in England, which is currently the situation in England. England માં જેવું એક particular street, એક એવું particular shops, right? Barclays bank, all that kind of things which are there right now was the same situation in Bombay at that point of time through the historical concepts, right? Moving ahead, he turned right along the Home Street and entered Forbes building, and then he moves through the train. He comes out of the train, he finds everything which is a part of the history. He turns right along the Home Street and enters the Forbes building. Forbes magazine છે, right? તો Forbes magazine ક્યાંનું છે? યુરોપનું છે, of the British era, right? So એ બધું concept જે foreign નો છે, England નો છે, એ બધો concept એક point of time એ બોમ્બે ની અંદર હતો, right? So he is finding all these things. I wish to meet Mr. Vijay Gaitonde, please, he said to the English receptionist, right? I wish, that is Professor Gaitonde, that is wish to meet Mr. Vijay Gaitonde, please, he said to the English receptionist. She heard through the telephone list, the staff list, and then through the directory of the employee of all the branches of the firm. She shook her head and said, I am afraid and I can't find any one of that name either here or any other of the branches. Are you sure he works here? Right? Now Professor Gaitonde says, right, that I want to meet Mr. Vijay Gaitonde, please, right, to the English receptionist, right. હવે જે English receptionist હતી, right, એને બધું find out કર્યું. She searched through the telephone list, the staff list and the directory of all the employees. હવે એ જે બિલ્ડિંગમાં ઘૂસ્યો તો એ ફોર્બ્સની બિલ્ડિંગ હતી, right, અને બ્રિટિશર લોકોની બિલ્ડિંગ હતી. હવે એમાં વિજય ગાયતોંડે નામનું વ્યક્તિ કોઈ હતું જ નહીં. એટલે જે રિસેપ્શનિસ્ટ હતી એણે બધું ગોત્યું. She found each and everything, but the thing is she was not able to find the name Vijay Gaitonde. She shook her head and said, I am afraid I can't find any one of the name either or in any of our branches. Are you sure he works over here? This was a blow for Professor Gaitonde. Professor Gaitonde માટે એક blow હતો, and I am here to find Mr. Vijay Gaitonde, but I am not able to find it. So that was a blow. Not totally unexpected. If he himself were dead in this world, what guarantee had he that his son would be alive? Indeed, he may not even have been born. Right? I mean, he is getting confused, and that was a blow for him. That if he himself were dead in this world, now he is thinking by himself that if I am dead in this world, what guarantee had he that his son would be alive? Right? પોતે મરી જાય, કોઈ માણસ physically dead થઈ જાય, that is he or she able to find his own sons and daughters, and can they see them? Can a dead person see his son and daughter whether he is alive, yes or no? It's a question mark. The answer is no. Right? Right? If we die, આપણે જો મરી જઈએ તો આપણી જે નેક્સ્ટ જનરેશન્સ છે એને આપણે જોઈ શકીએ છીએ, અને શું આપણને ખબર પડે છે કે એ લોકો જીવે છે કે નહીં? That's a question mark. The answer is no, because we are dead physically. હવે એ પોતે આ કોન્સેપ્ટ વિચારવા લાગ્યો. Right? That there is no guarantee. If he himself were dead in this world, he is thinking કે હું જે વ્યક્તિને ગોતું છું એ વ્યક્તિનું ક્યાંય નામ જ નથી. Right? Professor Gaitonde is thinking that I am finding a person named Vijay Gaitonde, right, in Forbes magazine, in Forbes building, but there is no such name as an employee or in any directory of the particular employees who are working in that place. So he is thinking by himself, પોતાની જાતે વિચાર કરે. Right? If he himself were dead in this world, what guarantee that his son would be alive? Right? He cannot answer it because he is physically dead. Indeed, he may not even have been born. Indeed, he may not even have been born. He thanked the girl politely and came out. Professor Gaitonde is a particular receptionist, and he said, "Thank you, it's okay," and he came out of that particular building. It was characteristics of him not to worry about where he would stay. His main concern was to make his way to the library of the Ascetic Society to solve the riddle of the history. What is the riddle of the history? To solve the riddle of the history. Current state of affairs, right? Moving towards the first page, right? See, this is where the main story lies, right? First page, ફરીથી લાઈન વાંચું છું, ખાસ ધ્યાન આપજો. That was the surest way to find That was the surest way of finding out how the present state of affairs was reached through the historical books. Through the historical books, right? So now his main target is, that is, he thanked the girl politely and came out of that building. It was his characteristics of him not to worry where he would stay. It was not that much concept for him, or he was neither worried that where he will stay. But his main objective or his main concern was to make the way to the library. To make the way to the library of the Ascetic Society, right? To solve the riddle of the history, to find out what the historical concepts were there at that point of time. Grabbing a quick lunch at a restaurant, he made his way to the town hall, right? He made his way to the town hall. Grabbing a quick way at a lunch at a restaurant. He was, moving very fast to a restaurant. He had his lunch, and then he made his way to the town hall. Town hall, right? We'll finish this page and then we'll stop at the remaining. We'll discuss in the next session. Moving ahead. Yes, to his relief, the town hall was there. Now he found the town hall. What was there in the town hall? The books of the historical concepts, where he wanted to find something new, right? Yes, to his relief, the town hall was there, and it did house the library. That means the library was there, right? He entered the reading room and asked for a list of history books, including his own, right? And he પોતાની એક book લખેલી હતી જે history ની, એને એ બુક માંગી અને જે બીજી બુક્સ હતી હિસ્ટ્રીની even he asked for the books of the history in that particular library. His 5 volumes newly arrived on his table. એની પોતાની જે હિસ્ટ્રીની 5 બુક્સ હતી, 5 different sets of volumes that arrived on his table. He started from the beginning. Volume 1 took the history up to the period of Ashoka. Volume 1 એમાં ક્યાં સુધીની history included હતી? To the period of Ashoka. Volume 2 to Samraddhugupta. Volume 3 up to Muhammad Ghori. And volume 4 up to the death of Aurangzeb. Right? ત્યાં સુધી એને બધી historical books વાંચી. Step by step he came to knew about the historical concept. Up to this period, history was as it he knew. ત્યાં સુધી એ જે history હતી એ બધી એને ખબર જ હતી. And he knew it very well. The change evidently had occurred in the last volume. કેટલા સેટ્સ આવેલા વોલ્યુમના? 5. That means 5 different books were there of the history. 1, 2, 3 and 4. In each volume there was a different story of the history named with different persons, right? In the first was Ashoka, second was Samraddhugupta, third was Muhammad Ghori, and the fourth was the death of Aurangzeb. Till there, everything was there as a part of the history and as it was. There were no big changes or differences which he understood. એને જે સમજ્યું એ જ બધું હિસ્ટ્રી હતું અને એમાં એની સમજમાં અને હિસ્ટ્રીમાં કોઈ વધારે ડિફરન્સીસ હતા અને it was as it is. But the main difference where there was occurring, that was in volume number 5. The difference that was occurring is in volume number 5, right? The change evidently had occurred in the last volume. Reading volume 5 from both and inwards, he started to read the volume number 5. એ પાંચમી વોલ્યુમની જે બુક છે he started to read from both the and inwards. Gangadhar Panth finally converged on the precise moment where history had taken a different turn. બંને બાજુથી વાંચવાનું ચાલુ કર્યું, right? From both the concepts on the volume number 5, and he found out where the history had taken a different turn, right? Gangadhar Panth finally converged on the precise moment where the history had a different turn, right? That page in the book describes the battle of Panipat, right? That page, a page mali a history no volume number 5 mali, right? In the book described the battle of Panipat, right? And it mentioned that the Marathas won it handsomely. Battle of Panipat, and it mentioned, એવું મેન્શન કરેલું હતું કે જે બેટલ ઓફ પાનિપત હતું, મરાઠાસ won it handsomely. એટલે જે મરાઠી લોકો હતા એ જે વોર કરતા હતા બેટલ ઓફ પાનિપતમાં, they won it easily. Abdali was routed and he was chased back to Kabul, right? સામે કોણ હતું? અબ્દલી હતું, right? And he was being routed, that means he had to run away from that place and he chased back to Kabul, right? એની જગ્યાએ પાછો જતો રહ્યો, right? By the triumphant Maratha army led by Sadasiv Rao Bhau and his nephew, the young Vishwas Rao. That was the difference that he found out. Battle of Panipat, right? એમાં એવું કીધેલું છે કે અબ્દલી નામનો એક વોરિયર હતો, he had to move back to his place, that is Kabul, by the great victory of the Maratha army led by Sadasiv Rao Bhau and his nephew, that is the young Vishwas Rao. એવું કીધેલું છે, and that is where the difference is in volume number 5. અહીંયા એક ડિફરન્સ આવીને ઊભો રહ્યો. Now what is the difference? What it is, we are going to discuss in the next session, right? We are stopping the video over here, right? If I tell you the difference, the chapter would be clear, right? So let us keep it a little bit secret. In volume number 5 he found the difference. Now what is the difference? Where are small changes that are occurring in the history? That we'll discuss in the next session, right? So that is what the climax of the chapter is all about, right? So we are stopping over here. If you have any questions or any particular doubts, you can ask.